True story, my children tried to disinherit me. Their biggest regret was when. Have you ever looked at someone you love, truly love, and realized they were capable of the deepest betrayal? Have you ever looked at someone you love, truly love, and realized they were capable of the deepest betrayal? Have you ever looked at someone you love, truly love, and realized they were capable of the deepest betrayal? I have. Oh, dear, it's a pain that settles deep in your bones, a cold ache that nothing quite seems to warm. That feeling, that moment, taught me the biggest, most heartbreaking lesson of my life. A lesson about greed, about betrayal, and about the true cost of unearned wealth. It's a story I've hesitated to tell, for so long, because, well, it's about family, isn't it? And you always want to believe the best in your own flesh and blood. You cling to the hope that the love you poured into them, the sacrifices you made, would somehow shield them from the uglier aspects of human nature. You tell yourself, they'll come around, or, they don't really mean it. But sometimes, dear friend, the truth is just too stark to ignore. And sometimes, you just have to say, enough. The day it happened, the very last day I allowed myself to be a mere ATM for their endless wants, was still so fresh in my memory, a wound that, even now, sometimes feels as raw as if it were yesterday. I can still taste the delicate, floral notes of the Earl Grey tea I was sipping, feel the gentle warmth of the morning sun on my face as I sat in my favorite armchair, the worn velvet a comforting embrace against my back. My gaze drifted to the climbing roses just outside the window, their petals unfurling in a ride of soft pinks and creams, heavy with dew. It was a beautiful, peaceful morning, filled with the promise of a quiet day. The kind of day where the world felt in perfect harmony, a stark contrast to the storm that was about to break. Just the day before, I'd signed off on the last wire transfer, a hefty sum, mind you. A substantial down payment for Theron and Kendra's new yacht, a sleek, utterly unnecessary vessel they'd been coveting for months, complete with a ridiculous name, the Serene Spender, a name that, in retrospect, feels like a cruel, ironic jest. They'd called me from a bustling marina, their voices giddy with excitement, describing the luxurious interiors, the powerful engines, the endless possibilities of weekend escapes. I remember a flicker of unease then, a faint tremor of doubt in my usually compliant heart. Was this truly what they needed? Was this generosity fostering a sense of accomplishment, or merely deepening a bottomless pit of expectation? I pushed the thought away, as I always did. They were my children, after all. And before that, just weeks ago, I'd cleared the final, exorbitant student loan debts for both of their children, my grandchildren, Liam and Chloe. Tens of thousands of dollars, gone, just like that. They'd promised, oh, how they'd promised, with earnest eyes and solemn nods, that this was the last time, that they were finally going to be self-sufficient, finally stand on their own 2 feet, finally take responsibility for their own lives. Foolish me, for believing them. Again. The echoes of past promises, equally fervent and equally broken, resonated in the quiet corners of my mind. So, there I was, enjoying my tea, lost in the beauty of the morning, when the doorbell chimed. It wasn't the usual cheerful ring, it was insistent, almost frantic. And then, a series of urgent, heavy knocks, far too aggressive for a mere friendly visit. My heart, which had been so placid moments before, gave a sudden, uncomfortable lurch. A shiver, not from the cold, traced its way down my spine. I opened the door, a vague sense of foreboding already taking root, to find Theron, my son, and Kendra, my daughter-in-law, standing on my porch. But they weren't alone. Standing slightly behind them, almost as if she were a silent sentinel, was a woman with a severe, slicked-back bun and an overly bright, practiced smile that didn't quite reach her cold, assessing eyes. She introduced herself as Dr. Evelyn Reed, a geriatric wellness specialist. The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded, stripping the warmth from the morning. My heart, it just dropped. A cold dread, cloying and unwelcome, seeped into my stomach. I knew, in that instant, something was terribly, terribly wrong. The very air around them felt different, charged with an unspoken tension. Theron, usually so boisterous, so full of bluster and exaggerated gestures, was uncharacteristically quiet, his gaze darting around, avoiding mine. He looked drawn, his shoulders hunched in a way I hadn't seen since he was a troubled teenager. Kendra, on the other hand, was all saccharine concern, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that grated on my nerves. "Mom, darling, how are you feeling today? You look a little tired, perhaps? We were just so worried about you, weren't we, dear?" she chirped, her voice a forced lilt, linking her arm through Theron's, squeezing his bicep as if to prompt him, to inject him with some of her performative empathy. He just nodded, a weak, almost imperceptible nod, still unable to meet my eyes. The sheer transparency of their act was insulting, a crude pantomime that felt like a punch to the gut. "Mom," Theron finally mumbled, his voice unconvincingly gentle, a tone he usually reserved for when he needed a significant favor, "we've just been so concerned. You've been a little forgetful lately, haven't you? And, well, some of your financial decisions, they just seem a bit impulsive. We just want to make sure you're all right, that you're being taken care of." Forgetful? Impulsive? I'd just paid for their yacht. The absurdity of his words, given the enormous sums I had just transferred at their behest, was breathtaking. My mind raced, trying to make sense of their sudden, suffocating concern, their thinly veiled accusations. Dr. Reed then stepped forward, her smile unwavering. Her eyes, however, were cold and assessing, like a predator sizing up its prey. She began to ask me a series of questions, standard cognitive assessment questions, you know the type. What day is it? Who is the current president? Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? I answered them all, perfectly, lucidly, my voice steady despite the growing knot of fear and confusion in my chest. I even added a little flourish, explaining the etymology of the word geriatric to Dr. Reed, just to show her I was perfectly capable, a quiet act of defiance against her assumed authority. I felt a surge of pride in my clear mind, a defiance that hardened my resolve. But it didn't matter. Her questions were just a formality, a tedious, performative exercise. I could see it in her eyes, a flicker of impatience, a predetermined outcome. It was a show, a cruel charade designed to justify a preconceived narrative. Kendra then produced some papers from her designer handbag, a heavy, expensive thing I'd bought her last Christmas, its familiar leather now feeling like an object of scorn. "It's just some forms, Mom. To ensure your health and well-being are properly managed. We just want to make sure you're safe, that your affairs are in order. It's for your own good, really." Her voice was soft, laced with a pity that felt like a sharp, stinging slap in the face. I looked at the papers. They were clearly power of attorney documents, granting them complete and utter control over my finances, my medical decisions, everything. My entire life. My hand trembled as I took them, the words blurring before my eyes not because I couldn't see, but because of the sudden, overwhelming wave of understanding. The fog of confusion lifted, replaced by a horrifying, crystal-clear realization. They weren't worried about my health. They were worried about my money. And they wanted it now. Not when I was gone, not as a legacy, but while I was still breathing, still living, still capable. They wanted to declare me incompetent, to push me aside, to make me a ward of their supposed care, so they could pilfer my estate, systematically drain my savings, and live off my life's work. The yacht payment, the student loans, they weren't enough. They wanted the whole pie, every crumb of it. My own children, standing before me, orchestrating my demise, not with a knife, but with a pen and a doctor's fabricated diagnosis. It wasn't anger that washed over me then, not immediately. That came later, a slow burn. No, it was a profound, bone-deep sorrow. A betrayal so absolute, so complete, it felt like the very air had been sucked out of the room, leaving me gasping for breath. My heart was breaking, not shattering into angry shards, but crumbling into a fine, bitter dust, each particle a memory of love misplaced, of trust abused. To think I'd just given them so much, poured so much of my hard-earned money and emotional energy into their lives, only for them to turn around and try to take everything else, my very autonomy. The audacity. The sheer, unadulterated greed. My own children. That's when the decision solidified, cold and clear, in my mind. A resolve that was as hard as granite, unyielding and unbreakable. This was it. This was the final straw. So how did we get here, you ask? Oh, dear, it's a long and winding road, paved with good intentions and, I must admit, a fair bit of my own naivety. My late husband, Arthur, bless his soul, and I built up a modest fortune. We were not born into wealth, we built it brick by painstaking brick. He was an engineer, meticulous and brilliant, and I, a dedicated teacher, pouring my heart into shaping young minds. We lived comfortably, yes, but we were never extravagant people. We believed in hard work, frugality, and wise investments. Every penny saved, every smart decision made, was for a future of security, and for our children. We always believed in providing for them, giving them a solid foundation upon which they could build their own successful lives. But somewhere along the way, that provision transformed. It wasn't about helping them stand on their own 2 feet anymore, it became about lifting them up, carrying them, running with them, until they simply stopped trying to walk themselves. It was a gradual erosion, like water wearing away stone, imperceptible day by day, until suddenly, the entire landscape had changed. I remember the first time it started. Theron, fresh out of college, with a degree he barely earned and a head full of grand ideas, wanted to start a disruptive tech startup, he called it. The phrase itself sounded rather grand, didn't it? He needed a small seed investment, he said, just enough to get the ball rolling, to launch his revolutionary vision. He spoke of venture capitalists, IPOs, and becoming the next Silicon Valley sensation. He promised to pay me back, every penny, with interest, within the year. He even wrote it down on a napkin, a flimsy piece of paper now imbued with the weight of shattered trust. I, of course, gave him the money. It was his dream, after all, and what mother wouldn't want to support her son's aspirations? That startup lasted about 6 months, a spectacular fizzle rather than a disruptive bang. It vanished into thin air like a wisp of smoke, leaving behind only debt and disappointment. And the money? Never saw it again. Lesson learned, Mom, he'd said with a dismissive shrug, as if it were a trivial sum, a mere tuition fee for his entrepreneurial education. And I, like a fool, accepted it. I told myself, he's young, he's learning. He'll be more careful next time. The words were a balm to my wounded hope, a self-deception I desperately needed to believe. Then came Kendra. She always had expensive tastes, even as a girl. While other children were content with simple toys, Kendra yearned for designer clothes, the latest gadgets, the most exclusive experiences. Her wedding, oh, that wedding. She insisted on a fairy tale affair, something out of a glossy magazine, a spectacle for her friends and a monument to her perfect life. And who do you think paid for it? Every single last detail, from the imported calla lilies that cost a fortune, flown in from Holland, to the towering 6-tier cake, adorned with edible gold leaf. She just kept adding things, her voice sweet and persuasive, saying, "Oh, Mom, you wouldn't want me to have anything less than perfect, would you? This is my only wedding." And I, wanting my only daughter to have her dream day, to feel cherished and adored, I opened my purse again, and again, until it felt lighter than air. I remember overhearing her tell one of her bridesmaids, with a casual wave of her hand and a conspiratorial giggle, that I was happy to cover it all, because I love her so much. Not a word about the actual cost, or my budget, or the strain it put on my savings. It was just expected. A given. And the houses. Oh, the houses. Both Theron and Kendra, at different times, came to me with tearful pleas about how they couldn't possibly afford a down payment in this ridiculous market. Theron, with his grand aspirations, wanted a sprawling suburban McMansion, a cavernous space with more rooms than they could ever fill, complete with a 3-car garage and a sparkling pool he never used, claiming it was too much hassle to maintain. Kendra, on the other hand, desired a chic, downtown loft, all exposed brick and stainless steel, a trendy minimalist space that cost an exorbitant amount per square foot. So, I paid their down payments. Both of them. And then, when they struggled with the mortgage payments, because, of course, they bought more house than they could ever truly afford, living paycheck to lavish paycheck. I'd chip in, month after month, just enough to keep them afloat. They'd call, sounding so distressed, so put upon by the burdens of adult life, their voices laced with an almost theatrical despair. "Mom, the mortgage is due, and we just had an unexpected car repair, and Liam needs new school supplies. Could you just tide us over?" And I'd always say yes. Always. Because they were my children. Because I wanted them to be comfortable, to be happy, to have the life they believed they deserved. The pattern became deeply ingrained, a ritual of expectation and reluctant provision. The vacations, too. Luxury cruises through the Caribbean, ski trips to Aspen where they stayed in chalets rather than hotels, summer stays in quaint European villas, often for months at a time. They'd talk about these trips, planning them with such excitement, poring over brochures and itineraries, then casually mention they were a bit short. Could I perhaps contribute? And it was never a small contribution. It was always the bulk of the expense, the first-class flights, the 5-star accommodations, the private tours. I remember one particularly jarring instance. Theron called me from a 5-star resort in Bora Bora, the sound of crashing waves faintly audible in the background, actually complaining, about the price of the cocktails. He expected me to feel sympathy for him, while he was lying on a pristine beach, sipping on something with a tiny umbrella, on money I'd given him. Did he ask if I was enjoying my life? If I needed anything? Not once. Never. The conversations were always one-sided, a monologue of their needs and desires. The respect, you see, it just vanished. It started subtly, a missed thank you note here, a dismissive tone there when I offered advice they didn't want to hear. Then it became overt, undeniable. They stopped asking for help, they started demanding it. Calls would come, not with a polite request, but with an assumption that I was their personal ATM, ready to dispense cash on command, an inanimate object devoid of feelings or needs of my own. "Mom, Liam needs new braces, and the car needs new tires, and Chloe's private school tuition is due. Can you just transfer the funds?" "No, please, no, thank you, no, are you able?" Just a list of demands, delivered with the urgency of a parent telling a child to clean their room. As if it were my inherent duty to fund their entire existence, their children's existence, their entire opulent lifestyle. My own comfort, my own financial future, was never even a consideration. I remember once, I had a small medical scare. Nothing serious, thankfully, a minor arrhythmia that turned out to be benign, but it was concerning at the time, enough to send me to the emergency room and then for a battery of tests. I called Theron, hoping for some comfort, some reassurance, perhaps even an offer of a visit. He cut me off mid-sentence, just as I was explaining the doctor's prognosis. "Mom, is this going to affect the deposit for the new Porsche?" he asked, his voice tight with impatience, a palpable frustration at the inconvenience of my health issue. My heart sank. The Porsche. Another luxury item I was apparently on the hook for, a grand total of which I had just been made aware. I told him, as calmly as I could manage, my voice betraying none of the hurt I felt, that my health was not something to be measured against his desire for a new sports car. He just grumbled, "Well, just let me know when you're sure about the money, okay?" Not, "Are you okay, Mom?" Not, "Can I come over?" Not, "Do you need anything?" Just the money. That conversation, it stung more than any financial outlay. It showed me exactly where I stood in their priorities, a resource, a bank account, not a person. It became a pattern. Every crisis, every desire, every extravagant whim, led back to me. Their arguments, their financial mismanagement, their inability to live within their means, all became my problem to solve, my wallet to open. And I let it happen. Why? Because you love your children. You want them to succeed, to be happy. You want to believe that deep down, they appreciate you, even if they don't always show it. You want to believe that one day, they'll turn around, look you in the eye, and say, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." You invent excuses for them, rationalize their behavior, convince yourself that this is just a phase, that true gratitude will eventually surface. But that day never came. Instead, the demands grew louder, the expectations more entitled, and the love, or what I thought was love, grew colder, more conditional, a transaction rather than a bond. And then came the intervention. The attempt to institutionalize me, to steal everything I had worked for, to strip me of my dignity and my future. That, dear friend, was the final, unforgivable act. What would you have done? How much more could you take? As they stood there in my living room, my son and daughter-in-law, with their hired mercenary doctor, their faces a mask of feigned concern, trying to trick me into signing away my life, a profound quiet settled over me. It wasn't the silence of shock, though that had certainly been present moments before, but the silence of absolute clarity. For years, decades even, I had stifled my voice, swallowed my pain, and buried my disappointment under layers of manufactured familial harmony. I had told myself, they don't mean it, or, they're just going through a tough time, or, it's just money, Serafina, let it go. But this? This wasn't about money anymore. This was about my dignity, my autonomy, my very sanity, my right to exist as a capable, independent human being. It was an attack on who I was, a direct consequence of their insatiable greed. I looked at Theron, my son, the boy I had cradled in my arms, the child I had sacrificed so much for, the young man whose dreams I had so desperately wanted to see flourish. His eyes darted away, unable to meet mine, a flicker of shame, or perhaps just fear of exposure, crossing his features. Then I looked at Kendra, her smile fixed, her eyes calculating, already mentally spending the money she envisioned as hers. And then at Dr. Reed, a professional for hire, complicit in their cruel charade, her face an unreadable mask of clinical detachment. A profound weariness washed over me, a weariness so deep it seemed to pull at the very fabric of my being, threatening to consume me. But beneath that weariness, a spark ignited. A cold, hard ember of resolve, born from the ashes of my broken heart. No more. Not one more penny. Not one more ounce of my emotional energy. Not one more moment of my life would be dictated by their selfish desires. I sat them down. Theron, Kendra, I began, my voice surprisingly steady, almost serene, a calm that belied the storm raging within. And Dr. Reed. Thank you for your concern. I assure you, I am perfectly lucid, perfectly capable, and perfectly aware of what you are trying to do. Kendra's practiced smile faltered, a crack appearing in her carefully constructed facade. Theron flinched, as if struck. Dr. Reed's professional veneer seemed to crack ever so slightly, a flicker of surprise, perhaps even a hint of respect for my unexpected composure, crossing her impassive face. I won't be signing these papers, I continued, pushing the power of attorney documents back across the polished surface of the coffee table, a decisive gesture that felt immensely powerful. And I think it's time you both left my home. They tried to protest, of course. Kendra started, Mom, you don't understand, her voice rising in a desperate plea, but I cut her off, my hand raised in a gesture that commanded silence. Oh, I understand perfectly. I understand that you've come to steal what little independence I have left, now that you've bled me dry of everything else. I understand that the yacht payment and Liam and Chloe's student debts, which I just paid, were not enough. You want it all. Every last cent. And you're willing to declare me insane to get it. My voice didn't rise, but it was firm, each word a stone falling into a deep, silent well, echoing with conviction. Their faces crumpled. Not in remorse, I hasten to add, not a hint of genuine shame, but in shock that their meticulously planned scheme had been so easily uncovered, so brutally exposed. They mumbled excuses, half-hearted apologies that lacked any sincerity, but I didn't listen. I simply pointed to the door, a silent, unequivocal command. As soon as they were gone, the house felt strangely silent, but the quiet was no longer peaceful. It was charged with the aftermath of battle, the lingering tension of a profound rupture. My hands were still trembling slightly, a residual tremor of adrenaline, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. The heartbreak was still there, a dull throb, a phantom limb of my former expectations, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective instinct. I had to act. And I had to act fast. Their audacity had given me the clarity I needed. I didn't hesitate. I didn't wallow. There was no time for self-pity, only for decisive action. I picked up the phone. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a kind, elderly man who had handled my affairs for decades, a man whose quiet wisdom I had always trusted, answered on the second ring. Mr. Henderson, I began, my voice clear and unwavering, stronger than I thought possible, I need you to come to my house immediately. There are some urgent matters we need to discuss. I need to revoke all financial support to Theron and Kendra. Effective immediately. And I need to recall all significant gifts made to them, particularly the down payment for their yacht and the student debts I covered as loans. With interest. And then, I need to rewrite my will. Completely. Mr. Henderson, bless his soul, didn't bat an eye. He knew my children, knew their spending habits, knew how much I had given over the years. He had subtly, gently, tried to warn me in the past, always with a professional decorum that never directly accused my children, but his concern had been clear. He arrived within the hour, armed with his sturdy briefcase and a solemn, understanding expression. We sat at my dining room table, the very table where I had hosted countless family dinners, where I had watched my grandchildren grow from toddlers to young adults, where I had envisioned a future filled with shared laughter and enduring love. It felt profoundly symbolic, a place of family becoming a place of legal reckoning. We went through everything. Every large sum, every significant gift. The down payment for Theron's sprawling suburban McMansion, Kendra's extravagant wedding, their countless lavish vacations, the endless car payments, the business ventures that went nowhere, the designer clothes, the private school tuitions for Liam and Chloe. Every single financial outlay that had been presented as a gift was meticulously documented, item by item, converted from a gift to a loan, in my legal ledger. It was a painstaking process, stretching over several hours, each entry a painful reminder of my misplaced generosity. But with each entry, I felt a layer of my burden lifting, a heavy weight being shed. The yacht, the student loans, those were the easiest to classify, given how fresh the betrayal was, how clear their intentions had become. Mr. Henderson was thorough, detailing repayment schedules, interest rates, the legal ramifications of non-compliance. It was all above board, all completely legal. I had been foolish to call them gifts in the first place, when they were clearly expected to be endless provisions, a bottomless well for their desires. Next, the will. I want to leave nothing to Theron or Kendra, I stated, my voice firm, devoid of the emotion I still felt deep inside, but resolute nonetheless. Nothing at all. Not a single penny. Mr. Henderson looked up, a flicker of surprise, a slight widening of his eyes, indicating the gravity of my statement. Are you certain, Serafina? He asked gently, his voice soft with genuine concern. They are your children. They stopped being my children when they tried to declare me mentally incapacitated to steal my fortune, Mr. Henderson, I replied, the cold resolve hardening in my voice, turning it to steel. My fortune will go to causes that truly deserve it. I want to establish a substantial trust for a global charity, one that focuses specifically on providing clean water and education to impoverished communities. Access to clean water, to knowledge, these are fundamental human rights, things my children took for granted. And I want to leave a significant portion to my great-niece, Clara. She's the daughter of my estranged cousin, a bright, kind young woman who has never once asked me for anything, who has always shown me genuine affection and respect. Clara, who wrote me thoughtful letters on pretty stationery, who called just to chat about her studies or a book she'd read, who visited me not for my money, but for my company, bringing homemade cookies and a bright, honest smile. She was a breath of fresh air, a reminder that genuine connection, true appreciation, still existed in the world. Mr. Henderson nodded, his expression now one of quiet understanding, his initial surprise replaced by a knowing acceptance. As you wish, Serafina. It will be done. Within 24 hours, the legal process was in motion. Bank accounts were frozen to them, direct debits they had somehow managed to set up without my explicit knowledge were cancelled, credit cards I had given them for emergencies were swiftly revoked. The yacht dealer was informed that the down payment was now a loan, and if not repaid within a specified period, the yacht would be repossessed. The universities were notified about the change in the student loan status, now directly linked to Liam and Chloe, with the option for them to take over the repayments or default. My instructions were clear, concise, and utterly without emotion. I felt a profound sense of liberation, a lightness I hadn't known in years, tinged, of course, with an indescribable sorrow. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, severing ties so deeply woven, but I knew, deep in my heart, it was the right one. Of course, my decision was going to have consequences, wasn't it? And oh, what consequences they were. For a few days, there was a strange, unsettling quiet. My phone, usually buzzing with their demands, lay silent. I imagine Theron and Kendra were probably trying to make sense of why their credit cards were suddenly declined at exclusive boutiques, why their online banking showed insufficient funds for their usual frivolous purchases, why the yacht dealer was calling them, not to congratulate them on their new toy, but to demand payment of a loan they thought was a gift. The slow creep of realization must have been excruciating for them. Then came the phone calls. Oh, the phone calls. First, a confused text from Kendra. Mom? Did you mean to cancel my Saks card? It's not working. Her casual tone suggested a minor inconvenience, easily rectified by my intervention. Then Theron, a few hours later, his voice tinged with irritation. Mom, what's going on with the yacht? They're saying the down payment wasn't fully processed or something? This is ridiculous. Their initial confusion quickly turned to irritation, then panic, a rising tide of desperation. They thought it was a mistake, a technical glitch, a momentary lapse on my part, an oversight that I would naturally rush to correct. They couldn't yet fathom the true nature of what had occurred. And then, just 3 days after my meeting with Mr. Henderson, the real show began. The doorbell chimed incessantly, a frantic, desperate rhythm, followed by frantic, desperate knocking that vibrated through the very foundations of my peaceful home. It was Theron and Kendra, their faces a mixture of fury and outright terror. They burst into my living room, not waiting for an invitation, their usual veneer of polite entitlement completely gone, replaced by raw, unvarnished panic. Mom! What have you done? Theron bellowed, his face a mottled red, veins throbbing in his neck like angry worms. He looked utterly disheveled, his expensive suit rumpled, as if he hadn't slept, his hair a mess. Kendra, meanwhile, was already in tears, theatrical, sobbing tears that produced no real moisture, only streaks of mascara on her pale cheeks. How could you do this to us? To your own family? My credit card was declined at Chanel today. Chanel, Mom. Do you know how humiliating that was? My friends were there. I was trying to buy the new winter collection. Her voice escalated into a high-pitched wail, laced with self-pity and outrage. I simply sat there, in my favorite armchair, the same one I'd been in when they tried to have me declared incompetent, my hands folded calmly in my lap. My heart was pounding, yes, a steady, rhythmic beat against my ribs, but it was a steady beat, not a panicked one. It was the drumbeat of liberation. I looked at them, truly looked at them, and saw 2 overgrown, spoiled children, finally, after decades of indulgence, facing the brutal consequences of their relentless avarice. Please, Mom, you have to fix this. Kendra wailed, dropping dramatically to her knees, clutching at the hem of my silk dress. Her eyes were streaming, but I saw no genuine anguish, no hint of regret for their actions, only fear for her rapidly vanishing lifestyle, for the comfort she had always taken for granted. We need that money. We can't live like this. What about Liam and Chloe? What about their future? You wouldn't want to ruin their lives, would you? Ah, the grandchildren card. My favorite. The ultimate weapon in their arsenal of manipulation. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the silence stretch, letting their desperation hang in the air. Get up, Kendra, I said, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so, a quiet authority that seemed to shock them. Both of you, sit down. They hesitated, exchanging wary glances, but the sheer force of my unexpected composure seemed to subdue them. They sat, albeit perched precariously on the very edge of the sofa, like birds ready to take flight, their eyes fixed on me with a mixture of fear and resentment. Now, I began, my voice clear, each word measured, deliberate. Let's talk. Let's talk about humiliation, shall we? You want to talk about ruined lives? Let's talk about the humiliation of having your own children, my own flesh and blood, walk into your home with a hired doctor, trying to trick you into signing papers that would declare you mentally incapacitated, all so you could get your greedy hands on my money. Tell me, Kendra, was that not humiliating for me? Was that not an attempt to ruin my life? My dignity? My very existence? Their faces went white, as if all the blood had drained from them. They exchanged panicked glances, their eyes wide with the dawning horror of their exposed deceit. The air in the room thickened with unspoken accusations, with the weight of their unacknowledged guilt. And Theron, I continued, turning my gaze to him, my voice unwavering, you ask what I've done? I've simply stopped enabling your irresponsible, insatiable lifestyle. I've stopped bailing you out of every self-inflicted financial crisis. I've stopped paying for your McMansions, your sports cars, your designer clothes, your luxury vacations, your failed business ventures, and yes, your ridiculous yacht. I've stopped paying for your children's exorbitant student debts, debts they incurred for degrees they barely applied themselves to, knowing full well I would swoop in and pay for them, never having to face the consequences of their own choices. Theron spluttered, his voice hoarse, but, Mom, those were gifts. You said they were gifts. We signed no loan agreements. Gifts? I raised an eyebrow, a bitter smile touching my lips. A gift is freely given, out of love, without expectation of return or obligation. What you demanded, what you expected, what you took without a single word of genuine gratitude, those were not gifts. They were assumed entitlements. They were obligations you placed upon me, burdens you expected me to carry. And now, legally, through meticulous documentation and the efforts of my lawyer, they are loans. Loans that are due. I saw the exact moment the realization hit them, the cold, hard truth of what Mr. Henderson and I had done, the legal trap they had unwittingly sprung upon themselves. Their eyes widened further, mouths agape, the color draining even more from their faces. The yacht down payment? That's a loan now. The student debts? Loans that Liam and Chloe are now responsible for. Every single penny you've squandered from me over the decades is now documented, accounted for, and due for repayment. With interest. I paused, letting that sink in, letting the full weight of my words crush their last vestiges of hope. Kendra let out a strangled gasp, tears finally, truly, beginning to well in her eyes. You can't do that. You're our mother. You're supposed to help us. You'll ruin us. Help you? I asked, the bitterness in my smile deepening. I have helped you for 30 years, Kendra. I have emptied my pockets, sacrificed my own comfort, and ignored my own needs, all to ensure your comfort, your happiness, your extravagant desires. And what was my reward? An attempt to institutionalize me. An attempt to steal my entire estate while I'm still alive, still breathing, still capable. You have shown me, in the most painful way possible, that my generosity was not seen as love, but as weakness. As an endless supply. And for that, I am truly heartbroken. But my heartbreak has been replaced by clarity. By resolve. There will be no more money. From me, to either of you. Ever. They started again, with threats this time, their voices rising in a desperate, ugly crescendo. If you do this, Mom, we'll never speak to you again. You'll never see your grandchildren. Theron spat, his face contorted in a sneer, a flicker of genuine malice in his eyes. Kendra nodded frantically, her face a mask of spite. My composure did not waver. I met his gaze, cold and steady. That's your choice, Theron. That's your choice, Kendra. But know this, I have already rewritten my will. Your names are not in it. Not a single penny of my estate will go to either of you, or your children. It will go to a global charity, dedicated to providing basic human necessities to those truly in need, and to Clara, my great-niece, a young woman who possesses the integrity and kindness you both seem to have forgotten the meaning of. The color drained from their faces entirely. This was the ultimate blow, the complete and utter removal of their safety net, their imagined inheritance, the grand future they had always assumed was theirs for the taking. They began to argue, to plead, to try every manipulation tactic in their playbook: tears, guilt trips, accusations of being a cruel old woman, of abandoning her family, of being heartless. But I simply listened, my gaze steady, my heart aching but unyielding. Every word they uttered, every desperate lie, every hollow promise, every attempt to twist the narrative, only served to reinforce my decision, to prove, yet again, that their love was contingent on my money, their affection a conditional performance. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only 20 minutes, they finally ran out of steam. Their threats felt hollow, their tears dried up, replaced by a desperate, trapped look in their eyes, the dawning understanding that their gravy train had irrevocably derailed. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. "I think our conversation is concluded," I said, walking towards the door, my movements firm and unhurried. "Goodbye, Theron. Goodbye, Kendra." And I opened the door, a silent, firm invitation for them to leave, a final, unarguable dismissal. They stumbled out, defeated, leaving behind a silence that, this time, truly felt like peace, a profound, restorative peace. So, what happened next? Oh, dear, it wasn't pretty for them, I can tell you. For Theron and Kendra, their opulent lives collapsed, quite spectacularly, into financial ruin. It started with the subtle inconveniences, the credit cards being declined, the calls from luxury boutiques they couldn't pay, the embarrassed apologies to friends about temporary account issues. Then came the larger, more public humiliations. The yacht, the Serene Spender, was repossessed within a month. I heard through the grapevine, a local news piece of all things, about the drama, the angry protests they made at the marina, their utterly theatrical outrage at being stripped of their frivolous possession. Soon after, their sprawling McMansion and chic downtown loft, both heavily mortgaged, went into foreclosure. They simply couldn't afford the exorbitant payments without my constant infusions of cash. They had to sell their expensive cars, their designer clothes, their custom-made furniture, anything to stave off the creditors, to pay back some of the loans they still owed me, because Mr. Henderson was relentless, legally speaking. He pursued every debt, meticulously and without mercy. I heard they moved into a much smaller, rented house, miles away from their privileged circle, a place that, by their standards, must have felt like a hovel. The last I heard, Theron was working odd jobs, something he hadn't done since his ill-fated startup days, struggling to adjust to a life without constant handouts. Kendra was trying to sell some of her remaining jewelry to keep up appearances, clinging to the last vestiges of her former grandeur. Their children, Liam and Chloe, found themselves facing the reality of student loan debt, something they'd always assumed would magically disappear. They were forced to take on part-time jobs, to scale back their expectations of grandeur, to learn, finally, the value of hard work and self-reliance. It was a harsh lesson, one I wish they hadn't had to learn this way, but it was necessary. I didn't take joy in their suffering, no. My heart still held a sadness for the family that could have been. But I did feel a quiet satisfaction that they were finally experiencing the consequences of their actions, facing the world they had so long avoided. And me? My own life, it changed in the most profound and beautiful ways. The first few weeks were a strange mix of relief and lingering sadness, a quiet mourning for what was lost, alongside a deep gratitude for what was found. It felt like shedding a heavy, invisible cloak I'd been wearing for decades, a burden of expectation and disappointment that had weighed me down. The constant worry about their demands, the emotional toll of their ingratitude, the endless cycle of giving and taking, it was all gone. My phone was blissfully quiet. No more desperate pleas, no more entitled expectations, no more calculated manipulation. I started doing things just for myself, things I had neglected for so long. I always loved gardening, but their demands had consumed so much of my time and energy, leaving me exhausted and creatively drained. Now, my rose garden flourished, each bloom a testament to the peace I had found, a vibrant symphony of color and scent. I took up painting again, a hobby I had abandoned years ago, dismissing it as a frivolous luxury I couldn't afford time for. I spent hours in my studio, creating vibrant canvases, pouring my emotions onto the paper, finding a new kind of expression, a quiet joy in the act of creation. I traveled, not to exotic places to escape my problems, but to quiet, meaningful destinations. I visited the communities that my charity now supports, seeing firsthand the tangible impact of my decision, the true value of my fortune being put to good use, transforming lives, building schools, providing clean, life-giving water. It filled my heart with a joy that money could never buy, a sense of purpose I had never truly known. And Clara, my great-niece, became a dear friend, a true companion. She would visit, not because she wanted anything, but because she genuinely enjoyed my company, our conversations. We'd talk for hours, share meals, and laugh, her youthful energy a balm to my soul. She never asked about my finances, never hinted at expectations, never treated me as anything other than her beloved great-aunt. She saw me for who I was, a person, not a purse. She brought a warmth and genuine connection back into my life that I thought I had lost forever, a reminder of what true family, true love, should feel like. What did I learn from all of this? Oh, so much, dear friend. I learned that sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't enabling, but setting boundaries, firm and unyielding. It's allowing people, even your own children, to face the consequences of their choices, to stumble and fall, so they might, finally, learn to pick themselves up. I learned that true family isn't about blood alone, it's about respect, reciprocity, and genuine care, a two-way street of affection and appreciation. And perhaps the most important lesson of all, I realized the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money, but the opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet, to build their own lives, to find their own strength. It's hard, it's painful, it feels like tearing a part of yourself away, but it's the only way they truly learn to walk. And in freeing them from my endless support, I freed myself. I found a peace, a genuine happiness, a profound sense of self-worth that had been buried under decades of giving and expectation. It was a painful journey, but I wouldn't trade the lessons learned for all the money in the world. That was my story. Our channel is full of life lessons like this one, stories of overcoming challenges and finding strength in unexpected places. If you found my story insightful, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications, so you don't miss our next video. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? Share your thoughts with me in the comments, I'll be reading all of them.